When joining the Mafia, it's well known that the lifespan of each member is constantly in question. For a lot of mobsters, living a fast life and dying young is just part of the job. But not every gangster dies before they go grey. Let's dive into 5 of the most infamous gangsters of the Bonanno Mafia family, starting off the list with Philip "Rusty" Rastelli, a man who ran his local crime family from behind bars. Emerging onto the scene in Maspeth, Queens, on January 31st, 1918, Philip Rastelli was one of 6 kids in the family. Young Rastelli became acquainted with the law at just 8 years old, when he was picked up for delinquency. Even though the rest of his childhood remained calm, his first conviction came at 18, when he accidentally killed a person while driving without a license. From there, he elevated to heavier crimes almost immediately. Rastelli rotated the realms of loan sharking, drug trafficking and extortion with pleasure. During the rise in his criminal activities, Rastelli met and befriended several mafia members: Dominic "Sonny" Black Napolitano, Carmine Galante, Joseph Bonanno and Joseph Massino. These ties would eventually lead him into the local mob, allowing him to expand his operations with ease. But on December 3rd, 1953, Michael Russo was shot several times by Rastelli and an accomplice, allegedly. By the late 1960s, Rastelli had worked his way up through the ranks of the family, and in 1969, Rastelli, along with 2 other men, Joseph Di Filippi and Natale "Joe" Diamonds Evola, were appointed to a panel to run the Bonanno family. The commission granted this power in hopes that the 3 bosses would be able to bring peace within the divided family. Eventually, they named Evola the boss of the family. Not taking his seat of power too seriously, Rastelli continued with his work in the loan sharking industry. By 1971, it's said that his exorbitant percentage rate of 250 to 300% interest that he charged each victim was pulling in over $1 million annually. But on July 21st, 1971, he was indicted in Riverhead, New York, for his felony crimes. It would take another year and a half, but on December 28th, 1972, he was convicted on 7 counts of loan sharking. This marked the beginning of his life behind bars, where he received his moniker, Rusty, because of the numerous prisons he frequented with rusty bars. The next year, on February 23rd, the commission held a meeting at the Americana Hotel in Manhattan, where they named Rastelli the new boss of the Bonanno crime family. The very next year, on March 6th, Rusty Rastelli was indicted on racketeering charges regarding his extortion game that he set up almost a decade earlier. In 1976, Rastelli was convicted not once but twice for his litany of crimes, including conspiracy, criminal contempt of court and usury, and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. During his time in the can, recently released family member Carmine Galante decided he would take control as the unofficial boss of the Bonanno clan. After his brazen move for control, several loyalists and commission members sought retribution. Reaching from his prison cell, Rastelli and Joseph Massino submitted a request for the removal of Galante. The approval was immediate, and Galante was green-lit. The contract was passed to Napolitano, who received a promotion once the performance was finished. With Galante gone, Rastelli regained full control over the family from the pen, at least momentarily. Still displeased with the boss running things from behind bars, a few separatists in the clan, Capos Alphonse "Sonny" Red Indelicato, Dominic "Big" Trin Trincera, and Philip Giacone, began approaching others in an attempt at a coup. When word made it back to the boss, he sent for guidance from the commission. Initially, the commission maintained neutrality, claiming they wanted the boss to handle his family issues. But in 1981, details about the 3 capos seeking control and arming themselves to the teeth with automatic rifles made their way to Massino, who immediately sent word to the commission. On May 5th, 1981, all 3 capos were killed. Almost 2 years later, on April 21st, 1983, Rusty Rastelli was finally released from prison. Immediately upon his release, he and Massino ordered the hit on Bonanno Capocesare Bonventre. Massino requested 2 of his best men to handle the task, becoming the family's street boss and heir apparent to Rastelli. The 2 leaders paved the way for peace in the family now, establishing order and returning the hierarchy of the clan. However, slightly more than a year after his release, Rusty was arrested for violation of parole due to his interactions with criminals performing criminal activities. During this era was the infamous Mafia Commission trial. The Bonanno family managed to miss most of the media heat due to their removal from the Donnie Brasco incident. This fortuitous event allowed them to maintain operations and grow, while most of the other families were experiencing major difficulties with the massive amounts of arrests. Yet, on October 14, 1986, Rastelli was convicted on 24 counts of labor racketeering. The following year, he was sentenced to another 12 years in prison. During his entire 18-year tenure as boss of the Bonanno crime family, Rusty Rastelli spent 15 behind bars, making him the only boss to lead the family while incarcerated for that length of time. On June 4, 1991, Rastelli was released from prison for his final time. Due to his medical condition, he was granted a compassionate release from the Federal Medical Center, FMC, in Springfield, Missouri. Less than 3 weeks later, on June 24th, Philip Rusty Rastelli died from liver cancer at the age of 73. His longtime partner and friend Massino took control of the Bonanno family after his passing. Being raised by the boss of an infamous crime family can be a blessing and a burden. While it can provide the luxury and respect everyone dreams of, it can also be a direct path into darkness. Let's delve into the life of Salvatore Vincent Bill Bonanno, the son of Mafia boss Joseph Bonanno, who rose to power after years of living life on the straight and narrow. Entering the world on November 5, 1932, young Bonanno, who picked up the nickname Bill at an early age, started his journey in Brooklyn, New York. His father, Joseph, had already proclaimed his power as head of the Bonanno family the year before he was born. However, Joseph had no desire to raise his boy into the criminal underworld and elected to bring him up properly. At the age of 10, Bill developed a mastoid ear infection, and it was advised by his doctor that he be relocated to a drier, hotter climate. Without hesitation, Joseph purchased a home in Tucson, Arizona, and sent his son to a Catholic boarding school. Bill would continue his childhood in Tucson, living the regular life of a kid from an affluent man. After high school, he attended the University of Arizona for 2 years, but dropped out. Shortly after leaving college, he was inducted into the Mafia as a made man and married Marie Profaci, daughter of Salvatore Lawrence Profaci Sr., in an attempt to bond the families. However, his introduction into the family wasn't accepted by all. Many members who started at the bottom and worked their way up resented his immediate induction and considered him too intellectual for the role. Tension increased when he advised his father to avoid narcotics trafficking, a burgeoning business in the tri-state area. To make matters worse, Joseph openly discussed making his son his number 2 man. During this period, his father also attempted a coup against the commission, aligning with Joseph Magliocco to assassinate their 3 rivals, Tommy Lucchese, Carlo Gambino, as well as Frank De Simone. When the plan was thwarted by the assassin they hired, Joseph was kidnapped and disappeared for 2 years. With no boss to lead, an up-and-coming gangster looking for control took advantage of the situation and started a revolt within the family. Gaspar di Gregorio created dissent in the family and divided them into 2 factions. This internecine conflict eventually escalated into the Banana War, pitting the loyalists to Bonanno against those standing behind Di Gregorio. Hoping to quell the conflict, the Mafia Commission announced the decision to induct Di Gregorio as the boss of the family. In 1966, the 2 factions agreed to a peaceful meeting to discuss terms, but when Bonanno and his crew approached, they were fired upon. Fortunately, nobody was injured in the ambush. Just 2 years later, Bonanno authorized a reprisal, and Di Gregorio was wounded in a shooting that led to a subsequent heart attack shortly after. Realizing their mistake, the Commission quickly countermanded support for Di Gregorio and chose to back Paul Sciacca as the new boss. After severing all ties with New York, the 2 men moved out west to Arizona. Ironically, after leaving the crime family, this is where Bill began his criminal career. After moving out west, he decided to participate in several extortion and scam operations. His first arrest came from a mail fraud scam he was running. On March 9, 1970, Bill was convicted on 52 counts of mail fraud and sentenced to 4 years in prison. But he would serve less than 2 years of his sentence, and at the end of 1971, he and his brother Joe Jr. were arrested and convicted for extortion and conspiracy. The brothers were also suspected of a $2 million extortion deal with a Cadillac Oldsmobile dealer in California by the name of Lou Peters. Finally, Bill Bonanno would receive his last conviction in November of 1985. His indictment, though, began back on January 23, 1981, for his involvement in a massive scam against the elderly. He was running the retired community in Oakland, creating false business proposals for home improvements that were never completed. After 9 delays over the span of 4 years, Bill was convicted of conspiracy and theft. He would later be sentenced to 4 years in prison on March 27, 1986. Altogether, Bonanno spent a total of 12 years in prison for the crimes he committed. After his years of experience and knowledge, Bill began telling his story and the tale of others he met along his path. But unlike most men looking to squeal to the FBI, Bill bolstered his knowledge with his formal education and wrote his first book, Bound by Honor, a Mafioso's Story. His autobiography was a huge success. Throughout the book, he detailed his story regarding his rise and fall from the Mafia family. What really sparked a nationwide interest was his theory on the Cuban exiles combining efforts with La Cosa Nostra to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. He stated that both factions had more than enough reason to hate the Kennedys, but he was certain of his story when he witnessed Jack Ruby, a longtime associate of Chicago outfit mobster Sam Giancana, murder the man accused of the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald. This catapulted his career in the entertainment industry. He later bolstered his career by assisting with several other mobster-based productions. Just before the turn of the century, Bill was employed as an executive producer for the miniseries Bonanno, A Godfather's Story. The limited series was derived from his autobiography, making him an essential part of the production. His works would go on to entertain millions across the world. Just about a decade later, on January 1, 2008, Salvatore Vincent Bill Bonanno was struck by a massive heart attack, killing him almost instantly. He was buried in Holy Hope Cemetery in Tucson.
Ready for a healthier life? Contact Pure Home 365. Our water and air purification systems are the only products that remove up to 99.9% of all contaminants and toxins that we breathe and drink. So call 904-386-3816 or scan the QR code to schedule your free consultation with one of our experts. We'll discuss the details about the contaminants in your water like lead, chlorine, and even arsenic, then provide you with a curated solution based on your family's needs to give you the cleanest cooking, bathing, and drinking water throughout your home. So call Pure Home 365 at 904-386-3816 or scan the QR code for your free consultation. Our friendly and knowledgeable staff awaits. Pure Home 365, helping people live longer, healthier lives.
Becoming the boss of a mafia crime family is an undertaking that requires vigilance and violence. Obtaining that position of power is often a short-lived role. When you're at the top, someone is always looking to dethrone you through death or deceit. However, for Don Stefano, he managed to live out the rest of his days until a natural cause of death. Join us as we journey back through the life and crimes of Stefano the Undertaker Magaddino. Born on October 10th, 1891, in Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily, Stefano was destined for a life of crime. His uncle, who bore the same name, was a leader in the Castellammarese clan alongside his two distant relatives Giuseppe Pepe Bonanno and his older brother and councillor Stefano, uncles to Joseph Bonanno. Due to an escalating feud with Felice Buccellato, head of the rival Buccellato Mafia, that led to the murders of Pepe and Stefano, young Magaddino immigrated to New York in 1902. His childhood remained relatively quiet. He eventually settled down and started a family with his new wife, Carmela. Although his criminal career started slowly, Magaddino made a massive emergence onto the police radar when he organized the murder of Felice Buccellato in March 1917. The Detroit gangster had fled Italy after the battle and set up shop, but the feud followed him and retribution was served. Several years later, Bartolo Fontana, a local barber, went into hiding before turning himself in to the police in August of 1921. Scared for his life, he confessed to the murder of Camillo Caiozzo, stating it was at the request of the Good Killers, a clan from Castellammare who sought vengeance against Caiozzo for his involvement in the murder of Magaddino's brother Pietro back in 1916. Fontana agreed to take part in a sting operation to nab Magaddino, and set up a meeting with him to get $30 in order to skip town. After the exchange, police swarmed Magaddino and arrested him on conspiracy to commit murder. Along with Stefano, the police also arrested Vito Bonventre and 4 others in the crime. However, the state of New Jersey chose not to pursue the conspiracy case and dropped the charges against Magaddino. Worried about the heat on his back, Stefano fled up to Buffalo, New York. Several months after his arrival, Buffalo crime boss Joseph DiCarlo died, leaving Stefano Magaddino in control in 1922. With his newly appointed position, Magaddino quickly established a legitimate front in Niagara Falls under the guise of a funeral home, Magaddino Memorial Chapel. With his border-controlled company up and running, he was easily able to use his operations to smuggle wine and spirits from Canada into the US, thus beginning his first lucrative empire. In 1924, not only did Stefano become a naturalized US citizen, but he also smuggled his son Peter and longtime friend Joseph Bonanno into the state through a shipping container going through the port of Tampa, Florida. During the Prohibition era, the Buffalo crime family made a fortune, establishing themselves as a key family figure in the underworld. When Prohibition ended, the family pivoted into several new realms of illegal activities, including loan sharking, gambling, extortion, and racketeering. As his operations expanded, so did the family's power and reach. During the 1930s, they controlled territories of upstate and western New York, namely Buffalo, New York, as well as areas down in Pennsylvania all the way up to Toronto and Montreal, Canada. While he used to smuggle booze from Canada into America, at this stage he was smuggling narcotics from the US up into the Great White North. Even though the family had grown into a giant among the mafia clans, Magaddino elected to keep a low profile, living a modest lifestyle and not flaunting his wealth for the world to see. Because of his old-school, refined ways, he was held in high regard and often asked to mediate disputes over territories between rival factions. As his rise continued, he became a prominent role in national and international mafia affairs. He entwined himself with La Cosa Nostra on several occasions and assisted Lucky Luciano with his endeavors of the Mafia Commission. He was responsible for orchestrating the mass gatherings of mob bosses for the Havana Conference in 1947 and the Appalachian Conference in 1957. But his ascent through the underworld wasn't without conflict. In 1936, a rival family attempting to dethrone the Don detonated a bomb in the Niagara Falls home on 1651 Whitney Ave. However, this wasn't actually Magaddino's house. The occupants inside, Stefano's sister, brother-in-law, and 3 children were home. The children escaped with several injuries, but his sister died from the impact. After the Appalachian Conference disaster, where more than 50 mafia bosses were arrested, another attempt was made due to his part in planning the event. The would-be assassin tossed a hand grenade through his kitchen window, but it failed to explode. There was one more final attempt. The mastermind behind the dark deed was none other than the man he helped into the country several years prior, Joseph Bonanno. In the pursuit of power, he coordinated a plan to remove Magaddino, as well as bosses Tommy Lucchese, Carlo Gambino, and Frank De Simone, all members of the commission. Seeking assistance from an allied family, Bonanno asked for help from Joseph Magliocco, boss of the Profaci crime family, who was rejected from the commission. Bitter and believing he could become Bonanno's right-hand man, he agreed and hired his top hitman, Joseph Colombo, to assassinate Lucchese and Gambino. But there's no honor among thieves or murders. Seeing a spot for a promotion, Colombo elected to divulge the plan to his targets in hopes of being moved up in the ranks. Realizing his boss, Magliocco, couldn't have developed such a devious plan on his own, they quickly established the connection back to Bonanno and requested a meeting with the two. Fearing for his life, Bonanno skipped town and fled north to Canada, leaving Magliocco to deal with the commission's judgment. But Bonanno was intercepted in his crossing and deported back to Manhattan, where he was scheduled to testify in October of 1964. But after dinner with his lawyers to prepare for court the following day, Bonanno was kidnapped outside of his attorney's apartment. After dodging several assassination attempts and removing the key witness to testify against him and the families, Magaddino's power and influence began to wane. Coincidentally, it would be his son who set him on his downward spiral. During a raid on his funeral home and his son's house, police found $500,000 in cash. This was made public after Magaddino told his men that money was tight and he couldn't afford any Christmas bonuses. This news spread like wildfire, and his honor and reputation were tarnished forever in the eyes of the other families. Stefano Magaddino would slowly be forced out of the family, and on July 19, 1974, he succumbed to his old age and died of a heart attack at Mount St. Mary's Hospital in Lewiston, New York. Stefano was 82 years old at the time of his death and was buried at St. Joseph's Cemetery on Pine Avenue in Niagara Falls. The story of Anthony "Tough Tony" Graziano is one that begins in the darkest corners of New York City, where the line between right and wrong is often blurred and survival means embracing the shadows. Anthony Graziano, known as Tough Tony on the streets, was no stranger to the criminal underworld. From a young age, he was immersed in a realm where power was seized through fear and respect was earned through violence. The streets of New York were his playground, and the lessons he learned there would shape his destiny. Born in New York City on November 12, 1940, his life was interwoven with the Mafia from the start. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, was a breeding ground for organized crime. The post-war era saw the rise of the Mafia, and young Anthony was right in the middle of it all. His family had deep ties to the Bonanno crime family, one of the infamous 5 families ruling New York's underbelly. The Bonanno family was known for its ruthlessness and its ability to control vast criminal enterprises. For Anthony, this was not just a family business, it was a way of life. Growing up in the shadow of organized crime, Graziano witnessed its brutal efficiency firsthand. He saw how disputes were settled not with words but with bullets. The lessons he learned were harsh and unforgiving, but they were the only ones that mattered in his world. He saw the respect commanded by men like Carmine Galante and Philip Rastelli, powerful figures who controlled vast criminal enterprises. These men were legends in the underworld, their names spoken with a mix of fear and admiration. They were the architects of a criminal empire, and young Anthony aspired to be like them. They taught him that in the world of organized crime, power was everything. To gain power, one had to be ruthless, cunning, and always ready to strike. He learned the language of violence, the unspoken rules of loyalty, and the cold calculus of power. In this world, actions spoke louder than words, and a show of strength could mean the difference between life and death. Petty thefts and street fights marked his adolescence. These were not just acts of rebellion, they were rites of passage. Each fight, each theft, was a step deeper into the world of the mob, a world where only the strong survived. By his early 20s, Graziano was a hardened criminal, comfortable with violence and fiercely loyal to the Bonanno family. He had proven himself time and again, earning the respect and trust of his peers. He was no longer just a boy from the streets, he was a made man. He was ready to climb the ranks, leaving a trail of blood and fear in his wake. His ambition knew no bounds, and he was willing to do whatever it took to rise to the top. The higher he climbed, the more he was drawn into the inner workings of the Mafia. He attended secret meetings where plans were hatched and alliances were forged. But with power came scrutiny. Law enforcement was always on his trail, looking for any opportunity to bring him down. Despite the constant threat of arrest, he managed to stay one step ahead. His name became synonymous with the Bonanno family, and his reputation as a formidable mobster was cemented. In 1990, Graziano admitted guilt to federal tax evasion charges. He had neglected to pay $100,000 to the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and had concealed certain personal assets by registering them under the names of his relatives. As a result, Graziano was sentenced to 5 years in prison and was required to pay a fine of $250,000. In 1994, Graziano commanded his crew to locate and assassinate John Papa and Calvin Hennigar, both of whom were mobsters affiliated with the Colombo crime family. This drastic order was prompted by an incident in which Papa and Hennigar had discharged firearms inside a topless bar in Staten Island that Graziano owned, injuring one of the patrons. In a fit of rage, Graziano directed his Brooklyn crew to hunt them down. However, Graziano later engaged in discussions with representatives from the Colombo family and reached a settlement regarding the issue. Consequently, Graziano rescinded the murder order. Nonetheless, in 2002, he was indicted on 2 counts of murder conspiracy stemming from this incident. In March 2002, Graziano faced separate indictments on racketeering charges in the states of New York, Arizona, and Florida. Then, in September 2012, he was indicted once more on federal racketeering and extortion charges, as well as for bookmaking and murder. These charges were based on recorded conversations with his son-in-law, Hector Pagan Jr., and included conspiracy to commit murder. On June 20, 2018, Graziano was indicted yet again in Arizona, this time on a range of charges that included illegal gambling and investment fraud. His fraudulent investment schemes, which were cleverly disguised under the previously successful Bulls and Bears Fund, resulted in the defrauding of customers to the tune of $11.7 million. On July 18, 2003, Graziano was sentenced to 11 years in prison for the charges he faced in Florida. Later that year, on November 13, 2003, he received a 9-year prison sentence for the charges in New York. During his sentencing in New York, Graziano's lawyer pleaded for leniency by highlighting his client's health issues, which included diabetes and having survived 2 bouts of bladder cancer. Graziano was eventually released from prison in August 2011. On May 25, 2019, Graziano passed away. After decades of dedication and finally being named boss of the family, a certain sense of loyalty is expected, right? But when life is on the line, anyone can switch sides to save their own hide. Meet Joseph Big Joey Massino, the only acting boss who turned into an FBI informant at the end of his reign in the Bonanno family. Born Joseph Charles Massino on January 10, 1943, he was one of 3 sons raised in New York City by his Neapolitan-American parents, Anthony and Adeline Massino. He was raised in Maspeth, Queens, which launched his criminal career at a young age. By the time he was 12, he was already committing petty crimes, and at 14 he left home and ran away to Florida. He later returned home, but almost immediately dropped out of school. Not letting his sordid actions affect his social life, he met Josephine Vitale and married her in 1960. They would have 3 daughters together. Towards the end of that decade, Massino had already gained the title of an associate in the Bonanno family. Under his mentor and friend, Rusty Rastelli, he and 2 other associates, his brother-in-law Salvatore Vitale and carjacker Dwayne Leisenheimer, became exceedingly good in the hijacking world. The 3 men would force commercial trucks off the road at gunpoint and fence the items stolen through his lunch wagon food truck. He was so successful that he had to open a new company, J&J Catering, to help him wash dirty money and move goods. For years, Massino was a great earner and garnered a lot of respect due to his hard work and loyalty to Rastelli. By 1977, Big Joey Massino was finally inducted into the Bonanno family, along with 3 other members in a ceremony certified by Carmine Galante. Ironically, the man who made him was also the man trying to remove his mentor and friend serving time, Rusty Rastelli. His loyalty during the impending power struggle didn't go unnoticed. Fearing his own demise, Massino couriered a request on behalf of Rastelli for permission from the Commission to kill Galante. It was quickly approved and executed in 1979, giving Rastelli full control again. With his loyalty unquestioned, Massino was promoted to full capo. Proving himself further, he was also involved in the assassinations of the 3 Bonanno capos who wanted to take control of the clan with Rastelli in prison. During this divide, the Donnie Brasco debacle occurred, causing every member of each family to take drastic measures for security. For Massino, this included the assassination of longtime friend Napolitano for his assistance in bringing Brasco into the family. At the end of 1981, 6 members of the Bonanno family were indicted for racketeering and conspiracy charges. The evidence leading to the charges was gained from the Donnie Brasco debacle. Thanks to an FBI agent on the Colombo payroll, Massino was tipped off about the imminent arrest, and he went into hiding in March of 1982. The following year, while Massino was still on the run, gathering information from the DA's case against him to plan his defense, his boss, Rusty Rastelli, was released from prison. Upon his long-awaited freedom, he immediately ordered the hit of Bonanno Capo Cesare Bonventre for not assisting him while in hiding. Massino turned to his friend and brother Vitale to accomplish the task since he was a fugitive. Vitale eagerly accepted and hired 2 of his best men for the job. At the meeting, they shot and killed Bonventre, then attempted to disappear the body in a couple of 55-gallon glue drums. Even though the body was found a couple of weeks later, Vitale was initiated into the family. In 1984, Joseph Massino negotiated his surrender through defense attorney John Pollock and turned himself in, subsequently being released on $350,000 bail. While in prison, Salvatore Vitale urged his brother-in-law, Joseph Massino, to become the official boss of the Bonanno family due to Carmine Rastelli's long imprisonment and failing health. Massino hesitated out of respect for Rastelli, but agreed to take over after Rastelli's death in June 1991. Massino was acclaimed as boss shortly thereafter. Upon his release in 1992, Massino named Vitale as his underboss and messenger to circumvent restrictions against associating with known mafiosi. Massino implemented numerous security measures inspired by other mafia leaders to avoid surveillance and infiltration, such as forbidding his name from being spoken, earning him the nickname The Ear, and closing social clubs. He also restructured the family's organization to minimize risks from informants and undercover operations, including creating a clandestine cell system and holding meetings in remote or foreign locations. Massino's approach helped maintain a low public profile and reputation as the last of the old-time gangsters. Despite his loyalty, Vitale became a figurehead as Massino reduced his role due to his unpopularity within the family. Vitale still assisted Massino in organizing significant hits, such as the murder of Gerlando Sciascia in 1999. After becoming boss, Massino renamed the Bonanno family to the Massino family, disavowing Joseph Bonanno due to his autobiography, which Massino saw as a breach of omerta. However, this new name did not gain widespread acceptance outside the mafia. Before Joseph Massino became boss, he was closely allied with John Gotti, supporting Gotti's takeover of the Gambino family. Gotti tried to secure Massino a seat on the commission, but was infuriated when Massino was promoted without his consultation. Massino later suspected that Gotti conspired with Salvatore Vitale to kill him. Gotti's influence waned after his 1992 conviction and life imprisonment. Massino criticized Gotti's public profile and the murder of his predecessor, Paul Castellano. Additionally, Massino had a poor relationship with Vincent Gigante, who opposed Rastelli and blocked Gotti's attempts to place Massino on the commission. The Bonanno family had been in decline since Joe Bonanno's ouster in the 1960s and was removed from the commission after Pistone's infiltration. By the late 1990s, however, the Bonannos, under Massino, became the most powerful crime family in New York and the nation, partly because Massino was the only New York boss not imprisoned. Being off the commission had protected them from the Mafia Commission trial, which decimated other families' leadership. Massino avoided meeting with other families to evade surveillance and encouraged his crews to operate independently. In January 2000, Massino led an informal commission meeting, where he influenced general policies for the 5 families, such as stricter qualifications for becoming a made man and restrictions on associates with drug convictions. The murder of Gerlando Sciascia strained relations between the Bonanno and Rizzuto families, with the Rizzutos increasingly ignoring directives from New York. On January 9, 2003, Joseph Massino was arrested and indicted, along with Salvatore Vitale, Frank Lino, and Capo Daniel Monghelli, on a comprehensive racketeering indictment, which included ordering the 1981 murder of Napolitano. Denied bail, Massino was replaced by Vincent Basciano as acting boss. Massino hired attorney David Breitbart for his defense. Before the trial, 3 more Bonanno members decided to cooperate with the FBI: James Tartaglione, Salvatore Vitale, and Frank Lino. Massino's trial began on May 24, 2004. He faced 11 RICO counts, including 7 murders, arson, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, and money laundering. Dubbed the Last Don by Time magazine, Massino was the only New York boss not imprisoned at that time. The prosecution, led by Greg D. Andrus and Robert Henoch, presented testimony from 7 major turncoats, including Vitale, who detailed Massino's criminal history. Breitbart's defense focused on cross-examining these witnesses and highlighting that the murders occurred before Massino became boss. On July 30th, 2004, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury found Massino guilty of all 11 counts. He was expected to receive a life sentence without parole. The jury also approved a $10 million forfeiture of proceeds from his reign as Bonanno's boss. However, the sentence passed down was upgraded to the death penalty. After his July 30th, 2004 conviction, Joseph Massino requested a meeting with Judge Garofis, offering to cooperate to avoid the death penalty for the murder of Gerlando Schiaschia. Facing execution, Massino became the first sitting boss of a New York crime family to turn state's evidence, motivated partly by the threat of his wife and mother losing their homes. His defection was influenced by disillusionment with Cosa Nostra, particularly due to many made men turning informants. Massino's cooperation led to the FBI uncovering the bodies of Trinchera and Giaccone in a Queens graveyard. He also wore a wire in jail to record Vincent Bastiano admitting to ordering the murder of Randolph Pizzolo, though he failed to get a confession about a plot to kill prosecutor Greg Andres. Massino's cooperation was confirmed in early 2005, and by June he pleaded guilty to the Schiaschia murder and received 2 consecutive life sentences. His wife negotiated a settlement to retain some properties, while forfeiting others. Massino was replaced as Bonanno's boss in 2013 by Michael Mancuso. He testified in the 2011 trial of Bastiano for Pizzolo's murder, and the 2012 extortion trial of Genovese capo Anthony Romanello, though his testimony in the latter case ended in an acquittal. Massino's sentence was reduced in 2013 due to his cooperation and poor health, and he was released to supervised release for life. Massino spent his final years in the federal Witness Protection Program, living in an upscale retirement community in Ohio under an alias. Despite being recognized and advised to relocate, he chose to remain in Ohio. On September 14, 2023, Joseph Charles Massino died due to his poor health in a rehabilitation facility in Glen Cove, Long Island. Massino was 80 years old.